Miraidon has just been banned from Gen 9 Ubers. A suspect vote was conducted and an 82.9% majority of eligible voters wanted Miraidon banned. This makes Miraidon the second Pokemon banned from Ubers in Gen 9, following Calyrex Shadow Rider closer to the start of the generation. And Miraidon now finds itself in a select group of Pokemon too powerful even for Ubers. This is a format where usually Pokemon aren't banned. Very few have ever been banned from Ubers, but sometimes legendary Pokemon are just that powerful. In the Gen 4 Ubers metagame, Arceus is banned, Mega Rayquaza was banned from Gen 6 and 7, Zacian and its crowned form in Generation 8, and now Calyrex Shadow Rider and Miraidon in Gen 9. Miraidon stands out from all these other banned Pokemon though because it has existed in the format for quite a while. This one is not as obviously broken as all of the other ones. Mega Rayquaza is one of the most insane Pokemon ever created, and it was pretty quickly banned from Gen 6 Ubers. The same can be said of Gen 8 Zacian crowned pre-nerf. That Pokemon was absurdly overtuned, and it did not take long for it to get banned. But Miraidon has been a legal Pokemon for over a year now. Miraidon has been a controversial Pokemon ever since the beginning, many calling it one of the strongest Pokemon in history, but still not strong enough to get banned instantly. Ubers is often a format where you have to accept the existence of incredibly centralizing and overpowered legendaries. That's the whole identity of the format. And in the past, Pokemon like Xerneas in Gen 6, and Primal Groudon in Gen 6 and 7, who are ridiculously dominant, were not banned. They were just a part of the tier that you needed some sort of response to on your team. Now, Miraidon is an extraordinarily powerful Pokemon. It's incredibly fast. Its ability sets electric terrain and buffs its special attack at the same time. It has so many options, and the things that can respond to it are extremely limited. But I also think that this ban is kind of a big deal for Ubers moving forward. The fact that a definitive Pokemon that the meta shapes around can be banned a year into the metagame's existence in Ubers is significant. Following this ban, Ubers is going to be a completely different metagame now. You no longer need a hard Miraidon check on your team. Unless you're a hyper-offense team ignoring defensive switches completely and just trying to go blow for blow with the enemy, it was pretty much mandatory to run something like Tinglu, Clodsire, or Blissey to handle Miraidon. Now this is no longer necessary. Miraidon's Quark Drive boost is no longer coming into play. Iron Shreds will probably drop off a cliff, a previously fantastic and commonly seen Pokemon in Ubers. And I can't help but wonder if this Miraidon suspect test will lead to more things being suspect tested in Ubers in the future. If Miraidon, who has existed for over a year in the format, can be suspected, why not Koraidon, a Pokemon who has been on a similar level of power for a very long time, with similarly limited options to actually check it, with sets like Terra Fire and potential to break through some of its most reliable checks as well with certain sets. Koraidon has sometimes been even more difficult to answer than Miraidon. That being said, there is now more space on your team to respond to this threat because you don't have to respond to Miraidon anymore, but this Miraidon ban does establish an interesting precedent. This is not something that usually happens in Ubers. The only Pokemon that have been banned from Ubers before are ridiculously overpowered ones that everyone unanimously agreed were broken pretty soon into the existence of the format. This is a very different situation here that calls the identity of Ubers itself into question, in my opinion. Maybe such an identity shift is valid for Generation 9, where competitive singles has been harder to balance than ever before. It is easy to get upset at Smogon and the Smogon community for wanting to ban things, but I really think this generation has just kind of put competitive singles in a very awkward position. Terastallization makes it even more difficult to evaluate whether things are broken or not, because powerful Pokemon get even more powerful with the ability to change into whatever type they want, making them even more difficult to predict, more versatile, giving them the ability to bypass and power through things that should answer them. Miraidon is an incredibly versatile Pokemon. Even its checks are not that reliable because it can just U-turn against them. Having access to U-turn is such a big benefit for Miraidon. Certain sets can even 1v1 the checks or apply significant pressure to them. Specs Draco Meteor will deal big damage to Tinglu coming in. Overheat will one-hit Iron Shreds coming in, and Calm Mind sets can even beat Blissey 1v1. And then when you add Terra on top of that, allowing it free turns to set up with Terra Fairy, and opportunities to reverse against enemy Miraidon or Koraidon, offensive Terra types, other defensive Terra types, it definitely becomes annoying to play in a format with Miraidon in it. Even though it's Ubers, and you're not supposed to ban things in Ubers, I can understand the frustration from the player base and this pretty significant percentage of votes to ban here. And maybe because of all these things, Miraidon is just a unique case where it was a complex Pokemon to evaluate and it needed time to evaluate. It is just as broken as all the other Pokemon banned from Ubers, but took a while for us to realize that. Or this could mean that maybe we are more willing to ban Pokemon from Ubers now, which might not necessarily be a bad thing. Maybe Ubers can change its identity. Gen 9 has really put a wrench in the works for Smogon in multiple formats, with dedicated players confused about which direction these competitive singles formats should go in, and casual players left confused at the ever-shifting metagames that can't decide what they want to be. And I don't blame Smogon for this. It's just an unfortunate side effect of a game that isn't really tailored towards this style of play anymore, to be honest. If you couldn't tell, I'm feeling kind of conflicted about this, and it may seem contradictory to what I said in my initial video about the Miraidon suspect. I think the difference is that that one was a lot earlier in the format's lifespan. If Miraidon was banned at that point, it's a firm decision being made by the community that they know what they want here. But the fact that we have let Miraidon exist after that, we voted no back then, and now Miraidon's banned way later, is just a unique situation that I have not really experienced before in a current gen. This is a big decision, and I hope that it is the right one for the Ubers community and this results in a better metagame for them. I'll be trying out Ubers without Miraidon in it, and seeing if the format feels a little bit more fair and balanced now. I have to admit to some bias as well. I actually quite enjoy Miraidon, even though I acknowledge that it's broken. I find it quite fun to use. I also have grown fond of the guy's visual design. I like the Miraidon deck in the TCG. It's my favorite deck. So I'm a little bit upset to see Miraidon go, even though I acknowledge that it's one of the strongest Pokemon we have ever seen in history. It is a ridiculous Pokemon. Definitely overtuned. It's difficult to predict how this ban might impact the future of Ubers. I hope that it has a positive impact, as without Miraidon, more team structures and playstyles will be free to exist without the strain of this monstrous threat that is so difficult to respond to, even with dedicated checks. Miraidon itself is a varied Pokemon that does create variety in teams and is fun to build with, but sometimes too much variety can be the big problem. If Miraidon was more one-dimensional, it'd be easier to answer, but because it has so many things you have to cover, and it's so inherently strong with such incredible stats, it does put a real strain on things. But how do you feel about this significant ban in Generation 9 Ubers? The banning of Miraidon. Do you think that this was a mistake or a step in the right direction? Let me know what you think down below in the comments, and thank you for watching.